On the Way Home would like to acknowledge the original stewards of whose lands this podcast is recorded on. In York Region, we recognize we're on the traditional territories of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe peoples, and that this is the treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit. In Vancouver, we acknowledge that we are on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, whose presence on these lands continue to this day.
If you grew up in Niagara or somewhere around there, what I was just humming was the theme to Eyewitness News. So I grew up in St. Catharines, and back before cable. I know I'm dating myself, and of course streaming. You could get probably about via 10, about 4 or 5 channels. One of them were all the Buffalo channels too. So Commander Tom, we had that. We had Commander Tom, I think, was the weather guy. And then we had Captain Kangaroo and different things that came from Buffalo News. And I think much of which was spoofed and was the inspiration for films like Anchorman, with the traditional kind of anchor people and sports and weather, that kind of thing. This is not that kind of show. So if you're looking for a traditional eyewitness news kind of show, you are in the wrong place. This is On the Way Home, and we talk all about issues, challenges, inspiration around in the area of housing, health, employment, wellness, anything that really touches on relieving and preventing poverty, homelessness, that type of thing. Great research that's happening in the sector, etc. We also feature a lot of inspirational leaders of all ages. Today, we have one of those inspirational leaders out there. And what I love about our guests, and I'll get to them in just a minute, it's just that a lot of people will point fingers and complain and talk about the housing crisis or income supports or all these different things that are happening. But this individual took action, right, at a very young age to really not say someone should do something. You've heard me say that before on here. She did something, right? She took an idea, made it happen, and is creating impact. And it's very, very cool. So I have all the time in the world. Love to hear, and hopefully she can inspire so many of us young people alike that have those ideas sitting in the back of their head saying, you know what, if we only did X, or what if we did this and this happened, right? Just do it. Leap and the net will appear, I believe, is the proverb, the quote. I'm not sure who said it, but it is a good one. And this person definitely kind of lives by that philosophy for sure. Let's talk about who brings you this podcast. My name is Michael Braithwaite, the host of the show. I am from Blue Door. Blue Door is an organization that has been around in York Region for just over 40 years, helping our region's most vulnerable. So York Region is situated just above Toronto, so it's the GTA. We have a population of over 1.1 million, and there's 9 municipalities, so 9 cities and towns that make up York Region. It's a massive geography. Some of the challenges are really transportation, hidden homelessness, because it's not right in your face. It's not really that street homelessness that you see, say, in centers like Toronto, where not having enough affordable housing, like many areas in Canada as well, low incomes, and of course, food poverty as well. All these different things happening across the region. It is a very wealthy region, but in the southern part of York Region, and many parts of York Region, because they're all very different, there's some deep poverty, and people, even more so now, experiencing homelessness and health issues. So we are at a bit of a crisis. And the good folks at Blue Door, all 100 of them, many of them frontline heroes, step up to support our most vulnerable with our emergency shelters, with our transitional housing programs, with our supportive housing programs, with our 2S LGBTQ plus inclusion program that we have, which is the transitional housing, supportive housing program, Bode and Forward, which are for families and seniors, supportive housing, transitional housing, and the list goes on and on. Our construction social enterprise construct, always thinking of new ways to meet our strategic goals. We don't do this podcast alone. It is in partnership with the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. They are always doing cool things, whether you need your community, your team needs training. So technical training, check out their website at caeh.ca. And they do a lot of really cool campaigns. Right now, they're working on a housing benefit and a housing prevention benefit that they have done the research around. They're suggesting that the federal government implements this. We know, I mean, if maybe 80% or more of people that come into the emergency housing um, sector when they need housing, 80% or so income based, right? If they just had the income supports, they would not need to enter the emergency system. They just need some of those supports and much, much more detail than that and much more. If you check out their website again, look for this report and they make it really easy for you to be part of the solution. Basically, you sign up, you give them your email, and then they can send directly and your postal code directly in your area a letter to your MP saying you support this housing benefit. It's beautifully written, and as well to your local newspaper too, saying you support this. And I've seen it all over social. They did a vote for housing campaign a while back in the last federal election, and housing really climbed because of this campaign from 12th maybe on the list of priorities to Canadians to number 4, and I would guess right now would be in the top 3 for sure. And this is what the Canadian Alliance does. It really just shines a light on the challenges Canadians are facing who are unhoused, but also the solutions too. And this is the solution. So go on their webpage, support that. Very easy to be part of the solution. I've done that. I got an email back from my MP saying, thanks for your letter. We really appreciate it. We want to create this groundswell to make real change happen across Canada. That's partly why we do the podcast too, is groundswell awareness, education. We know we are in a bit of a housing crisis right now. Maybe not a bit is not the right choice of words. We are in a housing crisis. During the pandemic, things got worse for our most vulnerable. And now with inflationary costs, food costs skyrocketing up, rents at record highs, interest rates way up there, the cost of transportation climbing, just all around us, costs climbing. It really has pushed so many more people into a state of vulnerability where they're experiencing being unhoused, food insecurity, etc. And these times call for big thinkers, for solutions, for thinking a little differently. So today's guest, a few years back, maybe a couple of years back, really saw what was happening and took action. And I want her to tell you all about that. And I have the privilege actually of working with our guest. So our guest is Emma Wood. And Emma works with me at Blue Door as a colleague, doing terrific work with us. We are so happy to welcome her to the team. Before that, and she continues to do this work, today we're having her on to talk about the program that she put in place called the Good Food Impact. And I wanted to tell you all about how it came to be, what its goals are, what its impact's been, what are the hopes for the future, all those good things, because this is something that could be duplicated. It's inspirational. Emma, welcome to the show.
Hey, Michael. Thanks so much for having me.
Can you tell I was well caffeinated? I mean, usually my intros are about half that, but lots to say today. Emma, we ask all our guests the same question, the same lead question when they come on the show, because it's a little different for everyone. It's personal. And that is, what does home mean to you?
I think I'm at a bit of an advantage because I've listened to this podcast a few times. But to me, a home is community, and it's the place where you feel most like yourself, but also that makes you feel comfortable and just loved. And it's going to be a bit cheesy, but I connect that with food because I think of getting together with people I love, and I think of food, and I think of home that way as well.
I think there's a huge connection to food. Absolutely, right? So many conversations and connections happen around food and cooking, etc. So let's talk about your journey. Talk to us a little bit. You are much younger than I, and you've done a lot of schooling. But just get who is Emma Wood? Walk us along to where you are now.
Ooh, big question. Yeah, I guess my food journey started back in my undergrad. I read a book called The Stop that's written by Nick Saul and I believe Andrea Curtis. And it really talked about how these two individuals took a food bank and turned it into something different. And it was the first time in my whole education career that I felt passionate about something and wanted to, do more research and do more work about that topic. So that was kind of from there on in, everything was food focused. I was trying to draw that connection from food security to international development. And um, it really all of a sudden landed me into this position where I was done my undergrad and I felt like I didn't know enough still. So then I pursued a postgraduate in food security studies at Ryerson, now TMU. And in my last semester there is when the good food impact came to fruition, I guess, as part of an independent study where we just wanted to create something for the community that I'm grown up in my hometown. And I never thought we'd actually create this organization out of it, but now here we are today.
And like most good leaders, you are shedding a lot of the credit, but the credit does go to you. How did this idea even come up? You just saw something in your community and you said, here's a need. No one's meeting that need. I should do something. I should bring some people together.
Yeah, so it was November 2020, just very much still height of the pandemic. And my mom came back from a dog walk and she had let me know that she ran into two folks who were sleeping in the clock tower just outside her house. And it was one of those ugly November mornings. And there's us in our house, warm, drinking our coffee, saying, where do you go for food support in town? And where do you go if you need shelter, if you need a meal? And that conversation essentially snowballed into conversations with community members, with local counselors, and just I kept asking questions and eventually found myself at this crossroads of something needs to happen, but what is it going to be? What will it look like? And that's when I pursued the independent study at Ryerson to really take the time to do the research to see what would work, how it would work. Um, and then we were at this point where we had a plan, we had funding, we started to get a team of volunteers, but we were paused from March 2021 to July 2021 because we were still in lockdown. And we just, yeah, finally came to be on July 2021 there.
Well, and I like what you're saying there too. Like this was not some fleeting thought on the top of your head, and you rush right into it. You did the research, you did the work around it, and you put this together. Now, what was the initial reaction from the community? What was the response?
So initially, when we put everything out, Facebook posts just saying we're looking for people to join our team, we're doing some food security initiative where we're preparing meals that will then become frozen meals and given out to anyone who needs them. It was quite positive. It's very much, great, good for you. So happy to be involved or get involved. And then when we launched, I remember a lot of negative feedback coming through because our whole promotion, and it still is to this day, is that anyone can access a meal from us. We don't have any restrictions, we don't have any categories, and we don't ask any questions. And immediately we were met with some resistance of, well, how do you know no one's abusing this? How do you know they actually need this meal? And right away it's tapping into that opportunity to educate instead and talk about, okay, what actually is food insecurity now and how has it shifted since the pandemic, and also who are we to one to judge who's hungry and who's not. um, and I have to say that seems to so far, knock on wood, be the only resistance we've ever had.
Well, interesting. I'll tell you a quick story. So when my kids were younger, I remember like maybe 6 and 4, and the principal. I was taking them to school. And the principal said, "Hey, Michael, would the kids consider coming to Breakfast Club?" And I was, horrified. I'm like, "Oh no, I'd like take breakfast away from someone who needs it." No, they would. And I said, "They're okay." And she said, "No, no, you have to understand that if it's only the kids and need, it becomes almost a stereotype. They're embarrassed because those are the kids." And he said, "If everyone comes, we have a good time. There's dignity there, right? Like, who knows who does it?" And I said, "Oh, I never thought I'd start a course, but," and selfishly too, I was like, "Beautiful. They get a much better breakfast than I'll ever make for them." They were pretty happy because it was wonderful food. But that whole point around dignity. So with your process and your the good food impact, talk to me a little bit about how does it operate? How's it a little different, say, from a traditional food bank experience? And I think the word dignity is found somewhere in there.
Yeah, so when we first were kind of doing that research of what to do, it came that we needed a meal program in Stouffville. We had a food bank and we had another nonprofit at the time that gave food out, but I kept going back to, what if you don't have a place to call home? What if you don't have the equipment to cook with? What if you don't have the ability to cook? And also, because cooking is exhausting among so many other barriers that come with it. So we wanted to do something with meals, but again, we were in the pandemic and you couldn't gather like you used to. And the more conversations I had with people running hot community meal programs, the more I realized we needed to do something different, something that had increased access points and something that was frozen. So, to walk you through how our kitchen works, our team of volunteers meets every Monday. We prepare roughly about 125 to 150 meals, always a meat option and a vegetarian option, and then a breakfast item. So either granola or breakfast cookies. And our team will bulk prepare these and then put them into individual serving size containers that are microwave safe, but also can be frozen. We put a label with all the reheating instructions and ingredients, and then they leave from us and get shipped to various points in the community. And these points change week to week. And once they're there, they immediately go in the freezer, and then anyone can access them from there. So each distribution hub has different hours open during the week where anyone can come and access meals. Somebody can come and access meals on someone else's behalf. And that idea was, rather than just on Monday nights at 5 o'clock, you could access a meal. You can now access it at any time during the week that's convenient to you. The different locations are all across town too. So if you live on one end of town and you don't have access to any form of transportation, it's not like you have to get yourself all the way to the other end just for a meal. You hopefully are close to one of our distribution hubs in those different areas, and you can, go and stock up on 2, 3, 5, however many meals you need just to get you through.
Which is important too. I mean, you're talking about the town of Stouffville, right? Which is
Yeah.
Stouffville area, and it's a big town, like geographically, it's from end to end. So it's important to have those access points for sure. So talk to me about the challenges. So you have this idea, you did the research, let's go. How did you get it funded? How did you get this thing off the ground? Were there challenges along the way?
I think many challenges, but the challenges were just kind of, forks in the road and deciding which way to go. We were fortunate to get local funding that allowed us to kind of get those first initial, dollars underneath us to buy food, because we were an unincorporated organization at the time, and there's very little pockets of funding opportunities. And then we actually did connect with Blue Door to go into a partnership to help getting more funding opportunities available to us. So definitely funding at first was the hardest one. And then once we got it, it was volunteers. And I say that because everyone's always so willing and wanting to help out. But it's finding that unique group of people who are there for that commitment, who want to continue to work with you, who also see the value of, this isn't just food, it's dignified food. It's food that makes you feel good. We're trying to connect with a wider community here. Um, and it's people who we still are a startup organization. There's a lot of grunt work. There's a lot of, admin tasks and other things to do that aren't that, flashy, do good volunteer role. It's the stuff behind the scenes. And while that was a challenge at first, those first few months finding good people, we have the same volunteers we've started with. They have stayed with us. They have gone into leadership roles. They've connected within their networks. So now our group of 25 volunteers is like this little community in itself. And it's really, I love walking into our kitchen now because everyone's just like full of conversation. When I go around town, I always run into everyone now. So every challenge we've seen, and we seem to somehow overcome it. Even little things like recipes not turning out, we try everything out at home first. We'll freeze it at home, make sure it works for us. We'll give it to friends and family, get their feedback, so we don't have that challenge when we're actually in the kitchen, because we're only in and out in 4 hours. So we need to make it as smooth as possible. And I think to our own benefit, I, previous to starting the Good Food Impact, was working in a community kitchen, teaching cooking classes and running collective kitchens. So I was already testing out cooking in groups and making bulk food and testing out with containers, so that I took that knowledge and just brought it straight to the Good Food Impact, and with the lessons learned and from the conversations with other people already doing this work. I think we were just at that advantage of, we had all this information behind us and we were just trying to say, okay, is this working? Is this working? And then found the path forward for us.
Very cool. And I remember when a former team member, Jericho, brought this forward, and he was so excited and said, and it was you and your leadership that sold it to him, saying, "This is something, Michael, we need to get behind and support in any way we can," because awesome work. So it was always really great to work with you and do that work. So if someone's to come to you and say, "I've got this idea to start up." And I want to push it forward. What's some advice you'd give from your experience?
Yeah, so I think I was really fortunate to be given this advice when I started, of just network with people, talk to people currently doing the work in your community, talk with people doing the work elsewhere across Canada, um, and just hear what's working and what's not working, and then see if it's already, your idea is already out there. Um, we always want to start something new and think we need to start something fresh, but there's so many good people and good organizations doing work out there already. Sometimes it's better to partner up rather than start something new. So my first would say network and do the research. And my second would be understand what you are going to get yourself into. And I say this quite honestly because when I started the Good Food Impact, I had no idea what I was getting into. Um, I didn't realize that now we would be an incorporated nonprofit, and my house would have boxes of food in it and containers all the time. And it really is like starting a side hustle. Um, Still to this day, there's work to be done, there's things to be put in order. It's a commitment. It's not just a one off and you do. And I think understanding that before you go into it would help you become more prepared for everything you're about to experience. And then my last one is make sure you're passionate about it. Um, I think if you're passionate towards a cause, you're going to be able to put your energy into it. Um, if you don't like what you do, it's going to be really exhausting having those late night and early mornings and juggling a bunch of things. So as long as you have that passion there, you're going to be set to go.
Wise words. You're absolutely right. You're a young entrepreneur in a sense, right? And you're driving this. It's 24/7 now. So people understand too. You're still doing this with a full time job, right? On top of this, you've got two full time jobs. But in talking with you in the past, I know you are no slouch when it comes to work ethic. Whether you're going to school and doing this work, or you're not one to sit back and take it easy. It's absolutely a lot of work, and so glad that you're doing it. Now, earlier when we were talking about this podcast, I called this, said, "Oh, it's the Good Food Program." He said, "Oh, you very kindly, as you always do, say, well, actually, it's the Good Food Impact, because impact is very important." Let's talk about that impact. What impact have you seen or heard about?
Yeah. So I think, we're still a very relatively new organization. We launched July 2021, and we were delivering to 2 distribution hubs in the community for a year. And then within the past 3 to 4 months, we've actually expanded to 6 distribution hubs, 5 which is new. Um, so we've really grown, and that impact has changed with that. And because we don't collect too much information from those who are accessing our meals, and we're not client facing, we don't get to hear firsthand the impact all the time. Um, but our distribution hubs are so great, and they'll send me emails of just sharing the impact. And it's stories of single moms who something happened, whether, brakes had to get redone on the car, and they just needed to access a few meals just to get them by that month. Or it's isolated seniors who are living alone and can't really cook for themselves anymore, but don't want to move to that next step of, moving into a home or assisted living. So they're accessing meals because that allows them to be a bit more independent. It's stories of people who might not have a place to come call home, and they're relying on the meals to just have that warm meal that they can reheat. So when I think about the impact piece, I think about how hangry I get when I don't have a meal in me, or I don't have food that I like. And I just hope that with what we do, we're making an impact on people's days, that they're fueled both physically but mentally, and that they feel that they're worthy. And that's where, I'm biased, but our meals are beautiful. They taste really good. And anyone on our kitchen team will tell you that I make sure when we're in the kitchen, they have to look a certain way. They have to look that, you almost like bought them somewhere gourmet, because I want somebody to take the meal on that end and say, you know what, I deserve this. I'm going to feel great after this. And hopefully that day becomes 10 times better for them than what it might have been. So the impact there is just really that connection, that how good food just makes us so much better. It connects us to so much more, and it makes us feel good.
And
Yeah.
let's get this straight. This is not the good enough food impact. It's the good food. I love what you were saying. So little story. A few years back, I was on this Governor General's leadership conference thing, and you go around Canada, and we were in PEI, and the group of us, they're from all walks of life, union, postal workers, union workers, business leaders. I was one of the few nonprofit people. But we went into something called the soup kitchen, and they're doing great. They're feeding people, which I never want to take away from, but the people on the tour were saying, isn't this great, isn't this great? And I said, no, not really. I said, I love the food part, but the way it's served, even calling it a soup kitchen, the negative, like the stigma that comes with it, I think the dignity part was missing. And to me, that bothered me, because I thought, going up and almost having to beg for food, for people, probably a number of people won't do it if you don't make it easier, if they don't. And the people that do, how do they feel about that? How do they, and just the things you hear about programs like yours, the meals are beautiful. What you put on your table, like, it's important. That dignity is important to you. And that's so cool. And so, and it's not good enough food. Hey, let's just get something to people you actually are caring about. This is nutritional food. This is tasty food. This is presented well. All those things matter. And I hear of programs where they do set it up almost like a restaurant, where you have the choice and you can't tell who's what. And I love that. We have colleagues, you and I, Emily and Rudy, who came up with something called Market Blue last year. And that really is the idea of a grocery store where, instead of people would have a special, like, it looks like a debit card, where they come in and be able to buy whatever they feel like they're going to buy. And everyone else could come in and shop too. So you wouldn't know who's being supported, who isn't. And the people that buy and pay full price are helping to support those who might need some help, right? It's that dignified and choice. I hear all those words, and what you're doing, it is much different than a food bank. You're right. What if I don't have a place? What if I don't know how to cook, or I don't have the resources to cook food and do that? You're making it easy, and you're changing lives. The latest Who's Hungry report from Daily Bread, right? People, after paying for housing, people using the food bank had $8 left over to pay for food. Indigenous Black communities had $6. So these are, and year over year, it's like a 200% increase in people needing food because of costs going up. So I only anticipate that the need for the good food impact is going to grow, unfortunately. And I say that because you talk to Neil, who's been on the podcast a number of times, from Daily Bread. He'll be like, put me out of business, man. Like, the answer is not more food banks. It really is. If people had affordable housing, if people had proper income supports, there'd be no need. They could afford food, and good food. They might need some support on the cooking end. Many of us do. But not. And so I ask you this long-winded way of saying, what are your hopes for the future of this program?
Well, just as you said, like, food is not going to solve food insecurity. And that's been something from the very beginning we've been open with. While it's not going to solve it, might as well eat well before we figure it out. So since incorporating the organization and changing the name to Good Food Impact back in April 2020, we've also grown our program. So we have our kitchen program, which remains the heart of the organization and what fuels the meals. But we launched our Good Food Student program. And the idea behind this is I never learned about food insecurity in school. I'm talking elementary school, high school, but we would have food drives. And we would talk about that there's people who's hungry in our community, but we never actually talked about why or how and just the different characteristics behind that and the impacting facts. So we launched this program with the idea that to go into classrooms and to host workshops to talk about, so what is actually food insecurity and why is it caused and how does it impact us, and having those connection or conversations with students about what does food make me feel, how is food connected to my life, and really just kind of opening their eyes to this world of food insecurity in a holistic way. And I say this because we talk about with our younger grades, we'll go and we'll talk about what different snacks look like, and with idea of nutrition by addition is what we call it. So just showcasing that food looks different on all our own plates, and that's because I think you know more and more of the younger generations, not from my time, unfortunately, but it's more multicultural classrooms and just showcasing the different ways that food can look like. And then with our older grades, we do more budgeting. So we talk about, we do a workshop with our grade 9, 10 students where we actually give them a list of, typical items you might get from a food bank hamper. And then we give them $15 and we ask them to make a meal plan for a few days. And they do, and it's fun. But the kicker is they've only actually had $5. So at the end, we go through and we say, what sacrifices do you have to make? And you see them process that of, wait, I can't buy this. Why not? And I think that's just recognizing that with the cost of food and with what's available, it's not always there. And then our older grades take it to a whole new level, grade 11 and 12, where they actually go through different life scenarios. But anyways, the idea behind this program is let's fuel the next generation to know what food insecurity is and be interested in it, want to do something about it, because they're going to be the change makers who are going to solve food insecurity. They're going to be the ones that say, wait, this, what we're doing right now is not working. Giving more food to food banks is not working. What are the policies that need to be addressed instead? So while we're still doing the food on our end, I'm really hoping that through our student program, we can just get more and more youth engaged and wanting to do something to make an impact.
I love that. I love that. That's so cool, the education awareness part. And you mentioned the P word policy. Often on the podcast, we say many of these issues started with bad policy. The only thing that's going to change them is better policy. And we need to make those changes happen, right? I mean, this is not the long-term answer. This is a patch for now, but a great patch and a great impact. If people wanted to get involved, if people wanted to volunteer, you happen to live in Toronto, York Region, Stouffville area, you wanted to get involved, or they wanted to donate, where do they go?
So you can visit our website, goodfoodimpact.org, or we're on Instagram and Facebook at the Good Food Impact.
Awesome, inspirational, fantastic, impactful work. Thank you so much, Emma. Glad to have you on the team at Blue Door. It gives me, I'm an old guy, so it gives me a lot of hope for the future with leaders and innovators like yourself doing great things. Thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael. Take care.
Man, often you'll hear me talk about good enough is not good enough. We don't need a better sleeping bag or a better tent. We don't need heated benches, that type of thing. We don't need a better can of food. And this is a great example of someone who said, I don't want to do something that's just good enough. I don't want to just do bare. And they thought, how do I make good food? How do I get it to people? How do we keep the dignity intact? Make it accessible, and all these brilliant things. She did the research. She took it upon herself. She did it. She's being very, very modest too. In that when she says, yes, she's got a lot of volunteers, but Emma is driving this on top of doing a full-time job. So for all of us complainers saying we don't have time, if you're really passionate about it, you find the time like she did, having huge impact in her community, in our region. And that's how you make change happen. It takes work, it takes community, it takes passion, and it takes thought and research. and time. And Emma has done all that. Very, very cool. And listen, if you're thinking about doing something similar in your community, reach out to Emma at the Good Food Impact. And I'm sure she'd be happy to share the secrets of her success. As she said, it doesn't have to be a brand new idea. You could borrow it from other places. And I'm sure she took pieces of ideas from other places and implemented it in creating the Good Food Impact. Well, thank you so much for joining, for listening. I hope you learned something. I certainly did. And I'll see you next time on the way home.